Hey everybody, welcome to Apocalypse Rising. Thanks for tuning in. I know you probably figure I'm going to talk about the stock market today. It's going crazy this week. The stock market's been all over the place, but I'm not going to jump on that one yet. I think it's, just there's a lot of uncertainty right now with the election and everything going on with the virus and all that stuff. I think Europe's closing down, so the stimulus isn't really passing at the moment. So there's a lot of things going on where if just a few things change, it could all turn around. So I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon yet. I think I'm actually just going to continue kind of talking about what I was talking about yesterday with, the melting ice and all that stuff. And I found an article. Once again, it's on my phone. This is a physics.org, I guess, article, and it's talking about geoengineering. And so the reason I want to talk about this is because I had made a couple comments in my video about how science was going to have to come through, and the solutions are becoming more and more daunting and complicated. And this is one that always comes up in that argument. A lot of people will say, well, we can just do geoengineering. That's kind of a proven science that would reduce the temperature of the globe. And then that's kind of the end of the conversation. But when you look into geoengineering, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Gay! Or whatever, there's a lot of potential side effects, negative consequences that could come from geoengineering. And just like with science, history shows that a lot of times science produces things, and out of that comes a lot of unintended consequences, negative consequences for that matter. And it's, typically they're designing these things with the forethought that this is going to be positive for humanity. And that's the crazy thing about science, is that it typically is created out of, a moral or an ethical place, and then unmoral and unethical people get a hold of it and figure out how to use it in a negative way. Allahu Akbar! And then that's where the unintended consequences come from. Or sometimes just the process of not completely understanding all the ramifications of what we're doing with our science, there come unintended consequences from that as well. So with this one here, geoengineering is basically putting aerosols into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight and reduce global warming. And a lot of people think that it could be a kind of like a fix-all to reverse global warming. And that's what I was saying yesterday. We've got to reverse global warming. It can't just be us reducing our consumption at this point. We're beyond that. So now we need to figure out a way how to cool the planet off. And using aerosols into the really high up in the atmosphere to block the sun essentially is one way that scientists theorize they could reduce the overall global temperature. Now, this is supposed to be one of 4 last ditch effort. It's kind of like, if you're dying and there's some sort of, I guess, like a drug that's not proven, but it could potentially save your life. Well, since you're already on your deathbed, you're willing to take this unproven drug to see if it helps you or not, because if it kills you, oh, well, you were going to die anyway. So that's kind of what geoengineering is. It's like, oh, the planet is heating up so fast, there's really nothing we can do except put these aerosols in the atmosphere and try to block the sun out and cool everything down. And so basically, there's a lot of evidence here that shows both the positive and the negative of geoengineering. But what stands out the most is that they're just now starting to experiment with this, because it really is just a theory. It's not like they've done this and they found that it works. They're theorizing and they're doing tests in a lab to try to reproduce their hypothesis and test their hypothesis and all that stuff. And so that's where they're at now. One of the issues that they think could possibly come of this is that it could also exacerbate climate change. That's a possibility. And so what they found is that having warming with solar geoengineering not only cools a planet everywhere, but also moderates changes in water availability and extreme precipitation in many places, and offsets more than 85% of the increase in the intensity of hurricanes. So it's not like they've put this out into the atmosphere and they've seen that. This is what they're assuming is going to happen off of their tests and whatnot. So they're using modeling and they're doing everything by scientific method, so that's great. But it does say that there is a chance that climate change could be exacerbated. Right now, it's a small chance that could happen, but what variables are they using to get to this 0.5%? I don't know, and so that would take a lot more research to find that out. But it's one of those things where in all reality, this 0.5% becomes 100% or 0%. It either happens or it doesn't happen.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb, for real.
And so it says the places where solar geoengineering exacerbates climate change were those that saw the least climate change to begin with. So even crazier is it kind of messes up the places that didn't really have climate change affecting them so much. Previous work had assumed that solar geoengineering would inevitably lead to winners and losers, with some regions suffering greater harms. Our work challenges this assumption. We find a large reduction in climate risk overall without significantly greater risk to any region. So this all sounds great. And they go on and they talk about other things that they're kind of experimenting. But this is the great thing about, and I really do commend science for obviously putting out limitations. That's something that scientists especially do when it comes to their conclusions, is that they always have a limitation. And here it says the researchers are quick to point out that this is a simplified experiment which assumed double CO2 concentrations and represented solar geoengineering by turning down the sun. So they didn't block anything out. They turned down the sun in their experiment. They're not really turning down the sun. And what's even crazier is, are they turning down the sun? What are the ramifications of blocking the sun out? I mean, does that affect the crops? Maybe does that then change photosynthesis and things that rely on ultraviolet and that kind of stuff? What happens when you start blocking out the sun? And we're supposed to be moving towards solar panels and those types of things for reducing carbon emissions, but yet we're going to be turning down the sun. Okay, so that's kind of crazy. So we're talking about large agriculture possibly being affected by turning down the sun. And that's kind of alarming, that we're not really going to know if this works until we try it on the planet, because right now they're just using a simplified experiment to say, hey, look, this could potentially work. And then you want to implement that on the global scale. There's a lot more variables. I feel a lot more areas that could fail, or gaps that you can find in the middle of it and wonder, oh shoot, this didn't come up in our simple experiment. Not to mention, there's a chance that this could overshoot, and it would make climate change worse if it overshot. And so I don't really know how they're going to find that balance with the aerosols. Can they take the aerosols out when they put them up there and find that balance? Once they're up there, how do they get them out? Is it going to have to be up there forever? Like, these are a lot of questions that I have about geoengineering. And so for me, it's kind of like, well, science is trying to come up with solutions to climate change and global warming and all that stuff. But look at what it is. It's geoengineering. That's crazy. This is something that could potentially make things worse. And that's something that we won't really know until we try it. So I guess that's all I wanted to talk about with geoengineering. If you know about geoengineering and that kind of stuff, put down in the comments what you think about it. I mean, I don't really feel like it's, like what do they call those, chemtrails and stuff? I don't really think that's what this is. Although they would use aircraft to put the aerosols into the atmosphere. And they would even have to have rules. I read another article where it said you would have to have rules so that you could detect if other private entities were putting up aerosols into the atmosphere without permission and all this stuff. So it gets really sketchy. Australia was talking about putting salt water into the clouds, and then the salt water would kind of form this layer on top of the cloud and make the cloud more reflective, and that would reflect the sun out. But I don't know how I feel about sun being reflected out when you talk about how almost everything we eat has to do with the sun. And you start diminishing that, and maybe you get a runaway opposite effect where these aerosols just build up and block the sun out completely. I don't really know. But if you do, put it down in the comments and let me know what you think about geoengineering. Is that a valid solution to the problems that we're facing now? I mean, they're talking about these experiments are going to take years, maybe 5 years or longer. Do we even have that long? At that point, how much aerosols are they going to have to put up to cool the planet back down? How long does it take for the planet to cool after they do this? There's just a lot of questions in my mind about geoengineering and aerosols in the atmosphere, mainly because it's something that's almost been like a science fiction-y type of thing, a last-ditch effort. Are we getting to that point where they're now thinking, we need to go to the last ditch effort stuff? That's pretty alarming. So I think I've given you my daily dose of fear mongering, and I hope everybody's doing well. Like always, it doesn't look like things are getting less crazy at the moment. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed for the future. We'll talk to you next time.
Do it! Just